So, hi Andy, thank you so much for having us today.
Yeah.
We met at the Turkish Film Festival this year, thanks to Barbara Stopan and his wife Elif. How did you like the experience at the Sony Picture Studios?
Oh, it was fabulous. I'd never been to the Turkish Film Festival, and my friend Barbaros and his wife Elif were, they're wonderful friends, and my wife and I wanted to go to support them, of course. But found the experience A+ Hollywood type of experience. Red carpet at the studio, movie premiere, a lot of stars there, and the fact that I was able the next day to participate in a roundtable discussion was icing on the cake. So it was super fun. Yeah.
Nice. And so our project is called Searching for Goodness. Mm-hmm. And how do you define goodness in your field?
In my field.
And how would we do it?
You're talking about my field of sports or sports photography?
Both.
Well, professional athletes are kind of an interesting breed of people. They're very committed. They're very tunnel focused. They tend to be somewhat aloof, only because they're so driven. I've encountered very, very few people in my almost 45-year career that are not the types of people that I would want to hang out with. Mostly every single person, everyone came from somewhere. Everyone had to start somewhere. This is one of the real reasons I started my podcast, because I love to get everybody's beginning, the story of how they started, who influenced them, who mentored them. So goodness to me is human goodness. It's how a person relates to me, how I can relate back to them, and sort of chemistry that we have as people, not as subject and photographer or mega athlete and media member or whatever, just a one-on-one sort of conversation.
Beautiful. And I'm going to combine the two, then throw the ball on his court, because he's a more basketball geek than me. I used to play basketball when I was younger. I love basketball. I like watching it too, but I'm not as much of a geek as Armin. And he won the book when in the Turkish Film Festival panel.
Yes, he did. I do remember that. He was the only one who knew the trivia answer.
Yeah, he walked into the room and I'm like, you already won a book.
Like in 15 minutes, it's just, right. I was handed a hard copy book.
There you go. Well.
But I want to say, I agree with you. I think podcast is a very important platform. With photography, you're freezing moments. Mm-hmm. You're making immortal. I mean, we see a lot of people become immortalized.
When you think of iconic moments in the history of the NBA, often a single image frozen in time is what your mind conjures up when reflecting on favorite memories. One of the men best known for capturing these images knows it's more than just a job. It's an art form.
Well, the game is an amazingly artistic and graceful game. For all the action and the physicality of it, it's a beautiful sport.
And so Andrew Bernstein set out in his career to capture those moments of on-court grace and action, eventually leading the league's efforts as senior director of NBA photos. And now on game day, before anything, it all starts with a pre-game setup ritual working alongside his associate Noah Graham.
When we show up in an arena, we get here about 3.5, 4 hours early before the game. We bring the whole candy store of cameras, the whole toolbox. So I have probably, I think I have about 4 or 5 remote cameras going.
When Warriors president Rick Welts was with the NBA League office in New York, he was instrumental in helping bring Bernstein into the fold as the league's official photographer, noting there's something very important to documenting the game frame by frame.
And the reason it was good timing was that Commissioner Stern was just taking over as commissioner of the NBA in 1984. And one of the things that was really a theme of his, what he wanted his time as commissioner to make a difference in, was recapturing the history and preserving the future history of the NBA. something we'd never taken seriously. We didn't have a video archive, we didn't have a photographic archive that really traced the history of the game. And he saw that as a terrible shortcoming and something that a real league that aspired to be a great league really had to have in place.
As for the process, some cameras are placed behind the backboard glass, for instance, because the key to this game is being ready from as many angles as possible to capture what enters the frame at just the right moment.
And what I like about sports, it brings people together. We had an episode earlier with Mark Johnson. With music, he brings people together. And sports from all over the world, people watching and getting excited, getting happy with a win.
Right.
I think unity is also part of goodness. What do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sports, like music, is a great unifier. We obviously saw that most predominantly during COVID, when we had the lockdown and all sports were stopped. I think what people missed the most, other than just seeing each other and being able to be within 6 feet of each other, was enjoying sporting events and going to events with your family or your significant other or your friends or whatever, you know. And it was so interesting when ESPN released early, they released the Last Dance documentary, which kind of saved everybody's sanity, I think, at that time, because we were all going out of our minds, you know, isolated and kind of locked down and shut away. But sport, we could really see firsthand how sports brings people together. And I don't think anything defines goodness than that feeling of feeling part of something, feeling part of a group, having mutual interests, you know, in sports, teams to cheer for, teams to cheer against. So it's a real camaraderie that sports brings to people as well. And music, of course, elicits other feelings, but music is also a unifier.
Right.
So I don't necessarily have the same musical taste as my 15-year-old daughter, but when we share our music, and she puts up with my music, my Bruce Springsteen constant drone of music, and I put up with her stuff, and that unifies us in a beautiful way.
Beautiful. And Armin, you had a question about the Mamba mentality.
Yes.
So in the full tier course.
Yes. Well, I want to also piggyback, because in sports arenas, we do get a combination of music and sports.
Sure.
So it's like
That's very true. Yeah.
double the amount of force. So yes, as Bessie mentioned, I was very fortunate enough to win this book, Mamba Mentality. You put together with the late Kobe Bryant, who was taken away from us very, prematurely.
Yeah. Well, tell everybody how you won the book, Marvin.
So
it wasn't just like a random thing, right? I mean, you answered. I don't know if it was difficult, but you had to know the answer to a trivia question, right?
Well, it was just a really rare occasion, because, I mean, even though like Los Angeles arguably is like Laker Nation, people, whenever I go to places, I always feel like I'm the only person who like loves basketball. I never hear anybody talk about like basketball, like to that like degree. So it was the first time I ever went to a social function, and I noticed a gentleman sitting at the panel. I'm like, wait a minute, like this guy is like speaking to me. He's like speaking everything that's been on my mind. And when you ask like the question about all the numbers the Lakers organization retired, it's like everybody was like, nobody knew.
Nobody knew. Somebody said like 80. You know? The question was how many Laker retired jerseys are hanging on the wall at Crypto.com Arena, right? So you knew it. You weren't just fishing around. You actually knew the answer, which was pretty amazing.
Because I mean,
people said 80. Few people said 3. A couple of people were just like, I don't know, 40 and whatever. And
I mean, I loved. I mean, I loved the NBA since I was a little kid. I mean, I'm from North Carolina. I mean, that was Michael Jordan's home state, and of course, everybody remembers Michael Jordan's heyday, in the '90s. And I definitely thank my older brothers. They introduced me to basketball, and it's just become my pastime. I always start my morning like listening to, watching highlights of sports, and I mean, I've always like followed basketball, and I wanted to also hold this book again, Mamba Mentality. I want to read the Mamba Mentality by Kobe Bryant. Mamba Mentality is all about focusing on the process and trusting in the hard work when it matters most. It's the ultimate mantra for the competitive spirit. it started just as a hashtag that came to me one day, and it's grown into something athletes and non-athletes embrace as a mindset. So I wanted to ask you, is there anything from the Mamba mentality that you have applied in both your personal and professional life?
The answer to that is all of it. So, the Mamba mentality is basically broken down into 4 pillars. And somehow or other, I guess I have been living and sort of an example of those 4 pillars in some way, shape, or form, because that's really what drew Kobe and I together, sort of subconsciously or unconsciously. We never talked about it during those 20 years together, but we did talk about it once we started doing our book together. Because first of all, the first pillar of the Mamba mentality is obsession. So Kobe has an incredible quote that says, "If you're not as obsessed with what you do as with what I do, we don't speak the same language." So he and I spoke the same language from the moment I met him when he was an 18-year-old rookie and I took his first headshot as a Laker. And when we got deep into the book and we had a couple of minutes just to kind of, take a break and talk about stuff, and I just said, "Hey man, what was it? What was it about me? There are a lot of people around, a lot of media members, photographers. What was it that drew you to me and gave me the ability to be inside with you in the inner sanctum?" He goes, "Well, you were just as crazy obsessed with what you did as what I did. You happen to be a photographer. I happen to be a basketball player, but our crafts kind of merged. 2 brains merged with each other, and our obsessions merged. So." I've been obsessed with my craft since I was 14 years old, and I still am. This is 53 years later. 52 years. I don't want to short myself. I don't want to age myself unnecessarily. And the second pillar is curiosity. I've always been curious about my craft. I've always reached out as part of curiosity to mentors or photographers that I have really put on a high pedestal that I wanted to become like. God willing, I could reach some level of greatness in my field. So I did that as a very young photographer. I continue to do that. I have mentors in my life that have been in my life since college. Which is pretty amazing. Kobe did the same thing. He's always curious about his craft. That's why there's pictures in this book, and it's known that he would pick Michael Jordan's brain, during a timeout in an All-Star game, where he'd call him up, incessantly. And Michael even emotionally talked about that at Kobe's memorial. And then, the ultimate curiosity for Kobe was just calling people out of the blue, other people of greatness, that he just wanted to know what made them tick. Like, he kind of knew what made him tick, but he wanted to find out from Bob Iger or President Obama or another great athlete, a Serena Williams, or whoever it could be. And one of the people he reached out to was John Williams, the great composer. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, they're working on a project together with a fabulous animator, Glenn Keane. They win an Oscar. First professional and only professional athlete ever to win an Oscar. That happened because he was curious. And the third pillar is relentlessness. It's just relentless pursuit of greatness. Just wanting to get to that next level and the next level and the next level after that. And I've always tried to do that in my craft. And of course, he did that till his last game, quite frankly. And the fourth is being strength. Strength is the fourth pillar because it's a combination of all 3. You have to be able to overcome adversity, be able to overcome, in his case, almost a career-ending injury when he blew out his Achilles in the 16th season. I've had many things in my life, physically and in other ways that I've had to overcome. So his examples of strength were really inspiring to me, as I'm sure they were to everyone else. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, because unknowingly I have embraced the tenets, the pillars of the Mamba mentality my entire life, my entire career. Until we put it in the book, I wasn't able to sort of put titles on each of those columns, but now we can.
Yeah, and they say that pictures speak 1,000 words. I listened to one of your episodes with with the late Kobe Bryant, and he said that he studied your pictures before he came to the NBA because you'd taken a lot of like iconic pictures, and he had those pictures on his wall, and he studied it, and he got just as much from the photos than he did watching tapes.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, when I first met him, he walked in my set, and he was a young player. I'd never met him before. I had heard, been privy to the hype and everything else, but out of respect, I always go and introduce myself before I take a photo. And I just put my hand out. I said, "Hey, Kobe, I'm Andy Bernstein. I'm your team photographer." And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Well, I know who you are, man." And thinking that was a little bit of a kind of smart-ass answer from this kid who's 18 years old. But I looked at him and I said, "Well, I don't know how that's possible because we never met." And his answer was, "Yeah, but I had all your posters in my room growing up," which means to me that this guy had something special. For him to study the posters to the point of he's seeing like a microscopic, basically, photo credit at the bottom of a poster that nobody reads. Nobody even knows it's there except us photographers who are jealous of, the other photographers who didn't. You might have gotten a poster I didn't get. It soon became obvious to me that he just didn't like pictures of like fun action pictures of Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson or Larry Bird or any of these guys that he called his quote-unquote muses. He studied those photos like almost like a doctor would dissect something. He literally looked at every single aspect of body language and how the head is turned, where the hips are, what the muscle tone looks like. There's 50 different things he could be looking at in a picture. He didn't care that it could have been an iconic moment or a famous moment in NBA history. He's studying it with a much different lens, right? Which was very impactful on me.
Yeah, I mean, nobody should be even surprised about the level that Kobe Bryant reached, because every time, whenever you see yourself around a group and everybody is just either, they just kind of get up, they go to work, and then they go home, and then they go to a social function. Kobe was different from the rest of his teammates. While they went out places, he put in the extra hours in court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, this all started as a young kid. He was, I think, 8, 9 years old when his dad was playing professionally in Italy, and Kobe would tag along and play against, grown men. And as he grew and they returned back to the U.S. and he started playing middle school and high school ball in Lower Merion, he had to continually work on his game because he was this scrawny teenager that had incredible athletic skills, but physically he wasn't particularly built for the rigors of the game. So as he came into the NBA and he took on to a very strict weight training regimen and his diet, and of course his basketball skill set had to keep growing every single year. And he was famous for studying tape well into the night, tape being videotape, that's what people used to do.
Yeah.
I was with him, I think there might be a picture in the book, where we were traveling to China for some USA basketball thing. I don't think it was the Olympics, I think it was an exhibition. And, it's a 14-hour flight, everybody's asleep.
Yeah.
But one guy's awake watching game tape on, on a DVD player. That was him.
Yeah.
So his work ethic was second to none. And that's inspiring, because when you're around a person like that, you want to up your game to show that you can measure up, I guess. And Kobe and I always had this game that we played against each other, kind of this mind game, like who would get to the arena first on a game day. And I always beat him because I always needed to be there when he arrived, to document that. And it was just, he'd always give me that nod, like, oh, you got me again. But every single game I would be there before he arrived. So took a lot of pride in that.
He was a special guy, man.
Yeah.
And I had to just kind of step away from the basketball side. So part of this documentary is dealing with global warming and climate change, and we wanted to get your thoughts about global warming, climate change, and also have you ever been to Antarctica? And if you haven't, would you like to go there one day?
It's funny you bring up Antarctica, because my wife is from Argentina, and first of all, I want to get to Patagonia, and then I want to keep going, and then get on a ship and go to Antarctica. I have a friend, Donald Morale, who's an incredible photographer, and he just did that. He just did the voyage,
Nice. I might want to interview him too.
Yeah, he's amazing, this guy. But I would love to go at some point. It's I wouldn't say it's on my bucket list, but it is something I'd want to do. Going to Patagonia is definitely on my bucket list for sure. And look, in terms of global warming and climate change and all that, we all have to be conscious of that. I mean, it's my generation and the generation before me, before that screwed everything up for the planet. It's up to my kids and their generation and then their kids, God willing, to, I guess, clean it up and sort of clean up our mess and have climate change be really at the forefront of policies that all the governments of the world really think about at the top level, and not have it buried somewhere. I think the whole world has to come together on something, and I think that something has to be about global warming and what needs to be done to kind of, I guess, turn things around in some way, shape, or form. And so it's up to all of us. But there's so much division in this world and even in our own country that I think there's a few things we all can agree on, and that if we're going to stay on this planet, it's kind of a no-brainer, and we all need to kind of agree that something has to be done.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And also, I would like for you to maybe talk about your podcast, Legend of Sports. It's a great podcast. I just
Thank you.
I mean, I just looked at some of the episodes that just caught my mind, and one episode I just had to watch was the interview with Muggsy Bogues, because I'm from North Carolina.
Okay.
I grew up an hour and a half from Charlotte.
Oh, no way.
I went to Muggsy Bogues basketball camp when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And one thing, when I heard Muggsy Bogues speak, it's like he was exactly the same guy I remembered when I was 12 years old. I mean, he was just very genuine, very down to earth. He was just amazing with kids.
Yeah.
And it just brought memories because, I mean, he was just a fan favorite,
Did you know that he got shot as a teenager?
He was 5.
Yeah. Was he 5?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Because he's originally from Baltimore, yeah.
Anyway, he grew up in a really tough environment. He was, 5'3", Muggsy? I think.
He was 5'3", yeah.
I mean, for a 5'3" guy to even make it, through high school ball, much less college and then into the NBA, it's like, a 10 million to 1 shot. But he did it, and he was a fun interview. That was as very early in the life of the Legends of Sport podcast. This is season 1. We probably did that interview 7, maybe 8 years ago. But it's interesting you bring that up because he gets sort of pushed under the carpet a little bit, at NBA history. And when you talk about all the great little guys of the NBA, he's definitely with 100% in that conversation, probably top 4 or 5 that you could mention. So, yeah.
There was just so many stories. I mean, even you talked about one of your podcast episodes. It was how basketball can save the world.
Yeah.
You mentioned Obama's photographer Pete Souza and how much because Obama played basketball, how much that kind of shaped how they took that sport mindset and applied it into their administration.
Yeah. I'll tell you something. That was one of my. Well, first of all, I have many authors. I've interviewed many authors on the podcast, and believe it or not, I've read every one of the books. And I don't speed read; I actually read them. And David Hollander, who wrote How Basketball Can Save the World, is actually a professor at NYU and teaches a class at NYU about how basketball can save the world. It's a fascinating subject. Basically, he took Naismith's 13 founding principles of basketball and applied them to how literally each one of those could be implemented in our society, in politics, in climate change, and racial issues we have across the board to to solve the world's problems, basically, and to the point where David petitioned the United Nations to institute a World Basketball Day, and was relentless about it. Third pillar of the Mamba Mentality, by the way. And finally, this year, a few months ago, they sort of had a ceremony where the UN agreed to now have a World Basketball Day every year. David came to the chambers there. I saw a great video.
What day is that? Do you know?
What's
What
that?
day is that?
It's I don't know what day it is. I think it's in. It could be in January. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak out of turn. But it already happened, and he brought Dr. J with him to the UN, and it was just fabulous. So one of my favorite interviews, and I just saw David a couple of weeks ago. I was in New York, and we had lunch together, and he's the real deal. I mean, he's so passionate about basketball, not just NBA basketball, but just basketball as you're talking about something that's unifying. That basketball just unifies all of us. All you need is, a ball and something to put it through, and it could be played anywhere.
Yes.
And he talks a lot about pickup games. I grew up in New York.
Yeah.
And we'd go to the schoolyard, me and my friends, and there'd be other kids there, and we'd have pickup games where we would choose sides, and I might be from another neighborhood, and you're with your buddies, and so now you're my teammate. And how pickup games are just like, if we could do pickup games in world politics, you imagine that? That would be unbelievable. And you spoke about Pete Souza, who is one of the greatest photojournalists in history. He was Barack Obama's chief White House photographer for 8 years, right? So Pete is, second to none. But Pete and I talked on the podcast about how President Obama had a basketball, there's a basketball court in the White House, but how that was part of his regimen. That he'd go down and shoot. It would kind of get the tension out. He had a staff member named Reggie Love, who was a former player, and President Obama would love to go one-on-one against Reggie. Then Kobe found out about the court, and the president invited Kobe. So, this is a great unifier, and it's wonderful to see, to have a president in the White House who loves our sport, is athletic, and can use it as a metaphor for everything that we want to be great in our country, I think.
We got to spread that philosophy fast, man,
Yeah.
before it's too late.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about the podcast, the next question I want to ask, and it was interesting because I listened to the interview with Pau Gasol, and he actually mentioned artificial intelligence. And I wanted to kind of shift it to you and ask, your thoughts on artificial intelligence.
Scares the hell out of me. In every way,
Likewise.
Every way, shape, or form. I have a daughter that's in medical school, and we've talked about it, and I can see how AI could really, really, really help in the medical field across the board. But it's kind of reminiscent of when the internet started, and it was like the wild, wild west. I mean, it kind of still is, right? Not regulated. Nobody really understands it. There's only a few people in the world who kind of figured it out, but do we trust these people, like with our lives and our children's lives, and what our children look at, and what the future's going to be? I don't know, man. I'm a little bit old school. Like, I'm the last guy who embraced digital photography. So you're talking to me about AI? That's like, okay, you got to show me how that's going to work and make my life better, and not be like Big Brother, standing over me and controlling my life and my kids' lives and everything else. So yes, there's got to be good stuff about it, but we have to be very wary. And now we can see with social media how the government is so late to the game now with regulating. Not that I'm into regulation and that government should be, in our business and at our kitchen table all the time, but the fact that now we're starting to look at like the effect of Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and all the rest of them. Like, okay, it's a little late to be doing that. And look, I'm guilty of that too as a father. I have 4 kids, and my youngest is attached to her phone, with social media. Gotta hope that, she's a good kid, of course, but we gotta hope that she knows what she's looking at and knows what not to look at. But it's very concerning, especially as a parent.
About AI just comes to my mind. Have you seen Space Odyssey? Stanley Kubrick's?
Oh, of course, yeah, 2000.
I always think the HAL. Always.
Yeah. That's very true. I didn't even think of that, Bessie, until you brought that up. But yeah, HAL was the epitome of AI, and how it was meant to help them on their long journey, right? But then turned against them in a way that like destroyed everything. So I hope we don't get to that.
I hope so.
But yeah.
And then we wanted to ask you about Bessie and I. This happened accidentally during some of our interviews, and we decided just to ask everyone this question.
Yeah.
We wanted to get your thoughts on birds. I mean, I heard birds chirping
it's
there
random.
earlier.
But we always get great answers to this.
Yeah.
Any anecdotes, it could be your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it's funny. The first thing I think of is my wife, because she loves birds. And like everything in our we have a vacation house in the mountains, it's bird related. When our daughter was little, her room was decorated with birds. So birds are very. I guess they're very calming in a way. Even the chirping kind of gets annoying. And we have a couple of big crows that come and pecking on our roof at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. It drives us nuts. But for the most part, I've never been that into birds, quite frankly. The birds I grew up with were basically pigeons in New York. So, I didn't really see too many like actual nice looking birds growing up. But being out here in California, and then of course up in the mountains, I can appreciate the beauty of birds and the freedom that birds. I think that's probably is that birds sort of elicit this sort of metaphor for freedom, right? Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting question that you would ask everybody. Yeah. I like it.
And any last thoughts? One last question we forgot about. We always ask about spirituality and science. What's your spiritual beliefs, and how do you compare and contrast with science? And any last thoughts? How can people find you? Obviously, Legend of Sports. Yeah. They can see it on podcasts.
Well, I do consider myself a spiritual person. I was brought up in sort of an Americanized conservative Jewish family. And, coming out here to California, raised my kids that way, I've sort of investigated and dipped my toe into various spiritual paths. Self-realization fellowship is part of my sort of, kind of like a salad.
Whenever I feel scared, be it AI, be it other things, I keep saying to myself, faith over fear. I fear. Like in terms of science and spirituality, I believe in medicine, I take my vitamins, I believe in science, but I also believe the power of faith, keeping us resilient and strong, our immune strong. So,
anyway. I agree. I mean, we like to say that fear is the absence of faith. And we're supposed to be fearful of things. I mean, obviously things that could hurt us and hurt our families or whatever, and you stay away from those things, and you see fire, you run the other way, and even though they tell you not to do it, you see a bear, you really run the other way. That's the fight or flight mechanism that has been genetically instilled in us, I think, since humans were first put on the earth. Faith is a whole other thing. Faith is whether you believe that there's a higher power, if there's, however you interpret the higher power to be, something that is bigger than us, that's sort of guiding us, that we can help make our lives more fulfilling. That's really what I believe in. So, but fear is part of life. If we're not fearful, I don't think we learn anything. You know, it's
Sure.
like fear is almost like failure. You know, you have to fail. You know, Pat Riley had a great quote, and I use this a lot, that fear is the greatest motivator. You know, as head coach of the Lakers at Showtime, you would look at the sidelines and you wouldn't think he was like in fear, but Pat does talk about that. He was very much in fear. A lot of, like, that they would fail or that he would call the wrong play or whatever that he defined it to be. But the fact that motivated him is pretty incredible too. Yeah.
True. Beautiful answers. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad we had an opportunity to interview. Do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback. I always use Michael Jordan's setbacks as an example.
Yeah.
Because I come from a traditional family. I'm the first person in my family to pursue the filmmaking route, and I always felt in my family they always were afraid of us kids failing. Like we don't understand this business, we don't know what it is.
Right.
They were just afraid of failing.
Yeah.
And like Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, got cut from his basketball team.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that didn't stop him.
No, it didn't stop him at all. It only motivated him. I mean, Michael has a great quote. I'm going to paraphrase it, but that you know, he missed 9,000 shots in his career. I think I'm trying to remember the quote, but like 27 times he was called on to hit the game-winning shot, and he missed it. You know, more than half the time, or whatever it is. Wayne Gretzky, you know, famously said, one of the greatest athletes, but the great one in hockey, said that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you just gotta go. You gotta go for it.
You gotta go,
You
man.
Take that shot. Kobe's mentality was, I'm gonna shoot that shot, that game-winning shot, like I shoot every shot. If I miss it, I'm gonna get that opportunity again, and if I miss it, I'm gonna get that opportunity again, and he's gonna just keep doing it. And it's you know, you honor the moment of defeat or disappointment for a second, and then you move on.
Your success comes from increasing your failure rate. You
Yeah.
have to allow yourself to fail and make mistakes.
Right.
And anybody,
For sure.
if you ask Michael Jordan or any other successful person, have you ever like failed at something? If they told you that they didn't fail anything, they're lying.
No, of course.
And even the best basketball player can't all the balls get through, right?
No, of course
Even
not.
the best.
I mean, failure is a necessity for success. It's a necessity. That the only way you can get to the next level, I learned this directly from Kobe, but in life, you know, my own self, the only way that you can succeed and get to level after level that you want to get to is by failing, is by learning from what you tried and didn't work, taking risks, taking chances. You know, I'm building this Legends of Sport platform, my partners and I. It's very challenging and to build a new sports platform in a very competitive, saturated, well-funded space. But, you know, it's little teeny baby steps, and then maybe it's a big step back. And then it's another, maybe one more baby step forward. And then it's 2 steps back. And if we gave up, we would have given up a long time ago. But what we've learned from those setbacks has only fueled us to continue sort of the relentless pursuit of getting to where we want to be. I mean, I can visualize where Legends of Sport, where I want it to get. You know, my partners and I are in total sync on that. We'll get there. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. It's just, you know, like Sylvester Stallone said, he got turned down 100 times for Rocky, for the script of Rocky. And finally, the studio that said they would do it said they would only do it if somebody else acted as Rocky, and then he said no. And he had sold his dog.
I know.
Because he had no money,
Yeah.
right? And he had the guts to say no and stick by his guns. And that's the most, like, it's so freaking inspiring, you know? So when people tell us that no, or we'll get back to you, and we never hear back, you know, you just move on.
Yeah.
You just, like, because I don't have the time or the energy right now, or the bandwidth to get caught up in negativity, quite honestly.
And it wasn't just Sylvester Stallone. Even Chaz Palminteri was very resistant when it came to Bronx Steel. He wanted to make sure that when he got produced that he was in it. And a lot of the studios were telling him,
Yeah.
no, we want their script, but we don't want you. And his agent's like, just take the money. He's like, no, I'm not going to do anything until I'm in it. And then luckily, his one-act play was very successful, and Robert De Niro saw it and says, hey, I want to direct this, and I want to make sure you're in it.
That's crazy. Well, we can probably see that across the board of maybe anything in business or creative. I had Steve Ballmer, the great Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers, one of the richest men in America and the world, told me about his trials and errors and failures and everything. I had a great conversation with Steve.
I listened to that one too.
We were both in the bubble at the time. I was in the NBA hotel sequestered, and he was in like the owner's hotel. It was hilarious. And you might remember this, but it was a great moment where I said, Steve, you're such a excitable guy. Like, you wear your emotions on your sleeve. You're in live and die with every point. You're jumping out of your seat. You're so flamboyant. I said, Steve, did anything in business ever get you that excited like it does to be sitting on the court of the Clipper game? He took a beat and he said to me, well, Andy, we did invent this thing called Windows 95, which did pretty well. So that was kind of interesting.
Can I look at this camera? This is how he sounds. Are you fired up? I am fired up.
That's pretty good. Wow.
I have these notes, but I gotta say I'm just fired up to be here today. Pretty cool. Pretty damn cool. Wow!
That was great. Anyway, hope that answered your question.
Yes, very much.
And obviously, people can just Google you or look Legends of and Sport. But anything else you wanna tell people how to find you, follow you?
Well, we're very active on social media. So the go-to place, it seems these days, is Instagram and YouTube. So you can find us at Legends of Sport on Instagram. Also, our Legends of Sport YouTube channel, where we're putting up videos, constantly cutting videos from the podcast and making shorts and then the long-form versions of the podcast. We have 200 episodes of the podcast.
Yes.
So the podcast can be found on our home base, which is iHeart, but of course it can be found on Spotify and Apple and everywhere else. So that's just called Legends of Sport. Got the big logo like this, you'll see it. And I encourage people to look at all the guests we have, because every interview was fun for me. And I never want to say one interview was better than the other, but if you're interested in women's sports or in a specific kind of sport, you'll find a guest that will take care of that.
It's very eclectic.
Thank you.
And still within the game of basketball.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks one more time. Thank you for having us. We appreciate if you mentor
Thank you so much
us
for having
too.
us.
Thank you.
And goodness will win.
All right, we say that. It's our
Goodness
slogan.
will win. I love that. Goodness will win.
Goodness will win.